Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Chapter 12, where we have been talking about prokaryotes. Now, the next group that we're going to talk about isn't really a prokaryote. In fact, it doesn't even necessarily qualify as a living thing. However, we do need to discuss it when we talk about biology, and it is actually related, sort of, to prokaryotes. It's at least the most similar thing to what it is. And that thing that we're going to talk about today is viruses. Okay, first off, the different parts. Now, you will notice that on this virus over here, flu virus, it internally has RNA. This bacteriophage virus over here internally has DNA. A virus will either have DNA or RNA. It won't have both of them. So it has a type of nucleic acid. And that is what's going to be containing its information, if you will. Surrounding that is called the capsid. This is a protein structure that is going to protect the DNA or RNA as the virus is traveling through things. And not every virus, but some of the viruses have what's called an envelope, which is very similar to what you think of as a membrane. And that actually protects the capsid. Okay, now there are lots of different viruses, but there are things about them that they have in common. And that is primarily they must use another living thing in order to reproduce. They cannot reproduce on their own. That is why they're not really considered alive. They're not even a cell. They don't have a nucleus and organelles. All they really are is this protein box, the capsid, that contains either DNA or RNA inside, and various other structures to help them function. But they are not able to use energy, they don't reproduce, they don't have organelles. Some of them, like I said, have RNA, they don't have DNA. So a lot of people have even questioned whether a virus should be considered a living thing or not. It does reproduce, but it has to have a host in order to reproduce. Doesn't necessarily have a cell. In fact, it doesn't have a cell, but it has a capsid. Okay, so the debate rages on. It'll probably never be solved as to whether people say that a virus is alive or not. However, when classifying viruses, the first division is whether it has DNA or RNA, because remember, it can only have one or the other. It cannot have both. And a lot of that will relate to whether or not, or how it functions, how it goes into a cell, how it uses the cell, and what it does to a cell. Okay, now there are so many viruses, it's crazy. Besides DNA and RNA, it can be divided up by shape. It can be divided whether it has an envelope or not, how it infects a cell, how it replicates in a cell, and on and on and on. So primarily what we're going to look at is DNA or RNA as far as the two main categories. But realize it can be divided up by these others because there's so many different types. It is difficult to divide them up into easy groups. Okay, just to give you a sample, these are a few different types of viruses by appearance. The color has been added by a computer so you can see some of the different structures, but you can tell there are a lot of different varieties by shape, by size, by types of structures, what kind of, things they have on their surface, all kinds of differences. So it really is hard to describe and define all these different characteristics easily, and we're not going to. Okay? Just realize the basics. They're divided up by whether they have RNA or DNA, primarily because that's how they function. Now, regarding size, what you may not realize is viruses are a lot smaller than bacteria. Okay, the bacteria right here that's pictured is one of the small bacteria, and these two viruses right here that are smaller than it are considered giant viruses. When we go down to the other viruses, they are a lot smaller than bacteria. So realize there's a huge difference in size, where bacteria are actually a lot bigger than viruses. Okay? And remember, bacteria attack a cell by releasing toxins on the outside. What you're about to see is a virus works a lot differently. Okay. Now, the first process is called the lytic cycle. This is the same root word as lyso, which remember means to cut or to break. Sorry. So this is the primary way a virus is going to infect your cell. They're picturing a bacteriophage in bacteria, but it could be any type of virus and any type of cell. Okay, so first off, you have attachment. That is where the virus, strangely, attaches to the cell. It's going to hook on, so it doesn't end up going anywhere. You can see these little thingies right here for this virus. Okay, secondly, it's going to inject its DNA or its RNA, depending on what kind of virus it is. Okay, and it's really just the strand that gets injected in. Okay, and then it enters into the cell. Thirdly, you're going to have the phage, the virus. They say phage in this version because this is a bacteriophage. Okay, the virus is going to replicate itself. It's DNA. Okay, it's going to use your cell and all of the processes of your cells to copy its own DNA. Then it's going to basically destroy everything of yours inside your cell, and it's going to use it to synthesize or make new viruses. All the pieces and parts. Then it's going to use your cell to assemble all the new viruses. Okay, so all through this stage, or stages right here, it has used and destroyed the inside of your cell to make more of itself. And then what happens is you end up with so many of these viruses inside that they truly cannot fit. You go from one virus entering to millions of viruses made. And at that point, you have what is called lysis. And that is where the cell of the host, we've been talking about your cell ruptures, it breaks, and all of the viruses that were in there, the millions of viruses that were made using your cell guts, are now released to go infect the rest of your cells. Okay, so this is the lytic cycle. Attaches, injects the DNA, replicates its DNA with your systems, makes all the parts for the new virus, puts the viruses together, and then lysis, destroying your cells to release the viruses. Now, this is usually what happens. This is why you don't feel good when you get sick with a virus, is because all of this is happening, and then your immune system has to go and attack these viruses. And your immune system can only attack the viruses when they're outside of the cell. Okay? Once they reach these stages where the DNA is inside and they're replicating inside, your immune system can't touch them without destroying your cell anyways. Okay? So primarily it's going to happen when the viruses are on the outside. Now, this is usually what happens. However, this isn't what always happens. It's very similar, but this is what's called the lysogenic cycle. Okay, so it starts out the same, and you can see I even used most of the same things. So first off, attachment, the DNA gets put in. However, you'll notice we're not going down, we're going over. So for number 3, instead of using your system to make its own DNA, the virus actually inserts its DNA into yours. Okay, so now you have this cell that actually contains DNA from you mixed with DNA from a virus. Then your cells will divide, and you'll end up with a bunch of these cells that contain the virus DNA or RNA. Now, for some viruses, that can be where it stops for decades. Okay, that's how the HIV virus, the one that causes AIDS, does. It stops at this point, and it could be 10 years after infection before somebody gets AIDS. It could be a cold sore that somebody gets. It could be all different kinds of things. And they'll stop right here for a long period of time, and you won't even know that you've been infected necessarily, because you may not have ever gotten actually sick. So then what happens is, because of what they say is environmental signals, because you get stressed, because you get tired, because you get a cold that weakens your immune system, something happens. What ends up happening is those cells, instead of just holding on to and copying that virus DNA or RNA, then will kick in to action and use your cells to copy the virus DNA. And then you go from there to making the new parts, to putting them together, to the lysis again. So what ends up happening is you could get infected with certain viruses, and they can stay asleep, essentially, just quietly copying themselves for decades, until something happens that lowers your immune system, and then you get sick. Okay? This is why cold sores come and go. The cold sore, most of the time you're fine, you're healthy, your immune system beats off the cold sore virus, and it just sits there replicating your skin cells. Then you get tired and stressed, your immune system lowers, and then the viruses kick on, and you end up with a cold sore. And all of that sore that you're seeing are the cells that have had lysis from the phage or the virus itself being released. Okay, we will talk some more next time. If you have questions, make sure you ask.